Thank you. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjabi Hari. Gopi Janavallabha Girivardhari. Jaya Gopi Janavallabha Girivardhari. Yashodanandana Bhajana Ranjana. Yashodanandana Bhajana Ranjana. Jamunatira Vanachari. Jamuna Tira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjabi Hari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjabi Hari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjabi Hari. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Padavajaka Ashtotar the Sri Srimad Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhakti Vedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. ISKCON BBT founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Padavajaka Ashtotar the Sri Srimad Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnavinda Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. Samaveda Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. All glories to the Assam of devotees. All glories to the Assam of devotees. All glories to the Assam of devotees. All glory to Shri Guru and Gauranga. Narayanam Namaskritya Narang Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamadiret. Before reciting the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is our very means of conquest, we should offer our respectful obeisances unto Lord Narayan, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and to Narayan Rishi, the supermost human being, and to Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, and to Srila Vyasadeva, the author, and unto Srila Prabhupada, the translator, commentator, and our spiritual master. Nashta Prayesha Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavatyuttama Shloke Bhakti Bhavati Naishtaki. By regular attendance in classes on Srimad Bhagavatam, and by rendering devotional service to the pure devotee, all that is inauspicious within the heart is destroyed almost to nil, and loving devotion to the Supreme Lord, who is glorified in transcendental songs, is established as an irrevocable fact. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. On the 7th day of December 2020 in SanDiego, we're reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, translation and commentary by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhakti Vedanta Swami Prabhupada. And we are in Canto 4, the fourth order, the creation of the fourth order. Text, chapter 28, Puranjan becomes a woman in the next life. Text number 24. Purim vihayo pagata uparuddho bhajangamaha yadatame vishirna prakatingata Purim vihayo pagata uparuddho bhajangamaha Yadatameva Vishirna Prakatingata Purim vihayo pakata Uparuddho bhajangamaha Yadatameva nupuri Vishirna Prakatingata Purim vihayo pakata Uparuddho bhajangamaha Yadatameva nupuri Vishirna prakatingata. Purim vihayo vihaya. It's an H. Purim vihayo pagata Uparuddho bhajangamaha Yadatameva nupuri Vishirna prakatingata Purim vihayo pagata Uparuddho bhajangamaha Yadatameva nupuri Vishirna prakatingata Purim vihayo pagata Uparuddho bhajangamaha Puri of Evanupuri Yadatameva nupuri Vishirna prakatingata. Can you read it, Glenn? You wrote it. Go ahead. Purim vihayo pagata Uparuddho bhajangamaha Yadatameva nupuri Vishirna prakatingata. Purim, the city. Vihaya, having given up. Upagataha, gone out. Uparuddhaha, arrested. Bhujangamaha, the serpent. Yada, when. Tam, him. Eva, certainly. Anu, after. Puri, the city. Vishirna, scattered. Prakatim, matter. Gata, turned into. Can you turn this down a little? This is Mukunda Charan level. Okay, before we continue, just this word Bhujangama, an interesting word. Can anyone figure out why that means snake? Bhujangama. In general means snake. An arm that's moving on the ground. Bhu is a jangam. A moving arm. Looks like a moving arm. Thank you, Mukunda. Translation: The serpent who had already been arrested by the soldiers of Yavanaraj and was out of the city, began to follow his master along with the others. As soon as they all left the city, it was immediately dismantled and smashed to dust. Purport: When the living entity is arrested, all his followers, namely the life air, the senses and sense objects, immediately leave the lump of matter, the body. When the living entity and his companions leave, the body no longer works, but turns into basic material elements: earth, water, fire, air, and ether. When a city attacked by enemies is vacated by its inhabitants, the enemy immediately takes advantage of that city and bombards it to smash the whole thing to dust. When we say, "Dust thou art, and unto dust thou shalt return," we refer to the body. When a city is attacked and bombarded by enemies, the citizens generally leave, and the city ceases to exist. It is a foolish person who engages in improving the condition of a city without caring for the citizens or inhabitants. Similarly, a living entity who is not properly enlightened in spiritual knowledge simply takes care of the external body, not knowing that the spirit soul is the principal factor within the body. When one is advanced in spiritual knowledge, the spirit soul is saved from eternal transmigration. The Bhagavatam considers those who are attached to their bodies to be like cows and asses. Saeva Gokaraha. The cow is a very innocent animal, and the ass is a beast of burden. One who labors under the bodily conception simply works like an ass and does not know his self-interest. It is therefore said, you don't have any, maybe you know this one. Also you say, Yasyatma buddhi kunape tridatuke Swadika latradisha bhoma ijadhi Yatirta buddhi salinena karhijij Janesha bingesh saeva gokaraha. Translation. A human being who identifies this body made of three elements with his self, who considers the byproducts of the body to be his kinsmen, who considers the land of birth worshipable, and who goes to a place of pilgrimage simply to take a bath rather than meet men of transcendental knowledge there, is to be considered like an ass or a cow. This is Bhagavatam 10:84-13. Human civilization devoid of Krishna consciousness is simply a civilization of lower animals. Sometimes such a civilization may study the dead body and consider the brain or the heart. However, no part of the body is important unless the spirit soul is present. In a modern civilization of cows and asses, scientists try to search out some value in the brain or heart of a dead man. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Midatam Mena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I was born in the darkness of ignorance, but my spiritual master Srila Prabhupada opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer humble obeisances unto him and all members of Sri Parampara. So this Bhagavatam is that torchlight of knowledge, one of the main torchlights of knowledge. And here we see that inevitable event, which is the utter demise of the body that Puranjan was occupying, which was likened to a city. The whole city, when the soul is gone and the life air is gone and the senses and everything else is gone, then this city, the body just reverts to its elements. It's nothing more than a very, very complicated machine made of earth, water, fire, air, and ether. Then you have the subtle body which goes with the soul. So it's just the gross body that doesn't have its supporting principle, namely the soul and its accoutrements, and so it just devolves and dissolves back into its constituent parts. Oftentimes, especially in India and other Eastern countries, that devolving is aided right away by burning the body, which has the added feature of detaching that soul from the body. When the soul leaves the body, it's sometimes, and the body is still lying there, and all the loved ones are there, then the soul wants to hang around for a while and is still attached to the body. But if the body is burned and cremated, and then that attachment is broken. But if one is not self-realized, God-realized, Krishna conscious, then your subtle body will then take you to your next gross body, and you'll start developing that. It may or may not be human. So this is the fate. Oftentimes you'll find in the Bhagavatam, either in the verses or the purports, this reminder that the body always has a lowly fate. It becomes ashes if you burn it. It becomes a stool of an animal. If it's thrown, like some sects, they throw the body in a secluded place and the vultures come and get it. Or if you bury it, it also becomes the stool of the worms and eventually devolves into earth. So what's the point of focusing all your attention on this body, which is going to have such a lowly end? This is one of the examples of trying to in the Shastra, trying to wake us up to the importance of the soul and not to focus simply on the external body. The problem is that we've been doing that for so long in so many different bodies and transmigrating from one to another that our mentality is accustomed to identifying with whatever body we happen to inhabit. And that and the identification is strengthened by our association, by the senses that we experience, the sense gratification and the pains also. Everything is coming through this body. And so without, in human form, it's possible to become enlightened from this bodily concept of life and attain self-realization. But in other forms, it's totally impossible. We're simply trapped for a certain number of years, or sometimes shorter than that, depending on the form that we inhabit. And we move on up until we come to the human form of life. But the whole point of the Vedic literature is to remind us how important this human form of life is. Nirdeham ajam sulabham sudurlabham. Krishna speaking to Uddhava, and he's describing this body as a wonderful boat, a unique boat that can take us over the ocean of birth and death. Sulabham plavam sukalpam gurukarnadharam. So plavam is a boat, sukalpam, very nicely constructed, just suitable for that. And we have a wonderful captain, bona fide spiritual master, Mayanukulena nabasviteratam, the favorable breeze to blow that boat right across the ocean is there in the form of Krishna's instructions through the Vedas and through the books that follow the Vedic version, as Prabhupada would put it. And so, Puman bhavabdim nataret, if someone does not cross nataret over this bhavabdim, the ocean of birth and death, what are we, Vijay? Atma? Atmaha. Yeah, Ham, the killer of the soul. Because you can't kill the soul, but you can postpone the self-realization of the soul for millions of years. In other words, it's a great chance. I've come to the conclusion we have these four regulative principles, and oftentimes, of course, difficult. No illicit sex life. Well, that's you got to work on that one. That's difficult, and sometimes you fail, and people fall away. And of course, meat eating. That's devotees think that's probably the easiest because you have the wonderful prasadam, and no meat eating and no intoxication. That often becomes difficult, but it's doable. And as far as gambling goes, that's pretty easy, unless you happen to be an addicted gambler, which there are. Even in this community, not this, living in here, but anyway, I won't get into that. But actually, I say that gambling is the most difficult one. Because as soon as we deviate from Krishna consciousness, we allow our mind to wander, or we cut corners, or we sleep in, or whatever, we don't take it as seriously as we should, the process. We're gambling. We're taking a chance that we'll be able to come back to it, that we'll be able to become serious again, that we won't dally with Maya in such a way that we really get entrapped and we lose the association of devotees. It's a gamble, because first of all, we don't know how much time we have left. This world it reminds me of this city that's being destroyed here. All of the things that people take for granted, especially in the United States, that it's such a wealthy country. You have a police department, and you have the fire department, and you have all of these things, and somehow or other you can find a job because there's so much. All of that is under threat right now. I mean, no one here is certainly, I think I can assume no one here has been through the Great Depression, right, the 1930s. I certainly wasn't. But my parents were, and it affected them for the rest of their life, to be in a situation where all around you, the props that have been keeping you up, that you take for granted, are falling away, and you yourself or friends or your family are out in the street, no jobs. You're in a food line for hours, soup kitchens, which we have today. Some of now you don't stand in line, you sit in your car for hours and hours and hours, wait to get the food package. And it could get much worse. So nothing is assured on this material platform. And certainly individually, who would ever imagine that I'd be sitting in a class with everybody wearing a mask because there's some deadly disease that we can get easily, And no one thought of that. And Maharaj is always reminding us how serious it is, giving examples from around the movement. So the point is that it's always this way, that material life is always very tenuous, and we should always be very serious about remembering Krishna and doing service and trying to advance in devotional service, and trying to give devotional service. This is one of the things that develops in an actual devotee, is that you begin to be very empathetic and sympathetic to others who are in the same situation you may have been in just a few months or years ago. And that is totally in ignorance. Om jnana timirandasya. To recognize I was born in the word is the darkest of ignorance. I think that's the actual trend, the darkest of ignorance. But my spiritual master came and opened my eyes forcibly. The actual verses is an instrument. To open the eyes, and apply that ointment so that you can see again. And sometimes it's you can imagine, what Prabhupada went through, trying to establish Krishna consciousness in a land where people, hedonist philosophy is there, and people have no inkling of the need for self-realization, what it means, or nothing. But moved by compassion, limitless compassion, worshipable compassion, and the instruction of a spiritual master, and the predictions of Lord Chaitanya, and the desire of all the parampara, Prabhupada, heroically, bravely undertook this mission. And that's a unique example in this line of the Gaudiya Vaishnavas. This has Srila Prabhupada here. No one else did it. Was it willing to get on a boat and basically go off into what would be looked at as a suicidal mission. In fact, the story of Srimati Maraji, who sponsored his trip, refused at first, said, "You're just going to die over there. You're 69 years old, your health isn't that great." And he did almost die. But he was willing to undertake that, and that for us, and that we should meditate on that, and that wonderful act of compassion, and try to imbibe that mood to whatever degree we can, which is the mood of Prahlad Maharaj, the mood of genuine Vaishnav, and be part of this preaching mission, take on austerities to spread the message. And of course now is traditionally the Prabhupada Marathon, and it's a time when devotees make a special effort to do that. So what's happening here with Puranjan? So as described in previous verses, he was completely absorbed in his wife and his children, and anxieties about what's going to happen with them, and so that young vapi smarang bhavam chajat jante kalevanam tam tamevaiti konteya sada tad bhava bhavitaha. It's like a key verse of Bhagavad Gita. Yum, whenever you see that repetition, it's a Sanskrit idiom meaning whatever, of this category. So whatever you're thinking of, could be anything. And we know even now, as devotees, sometimes thoughts come to us that we wish didn't come to us from a previous life, because we were absorbed in it at one point. So the mind is a very fickle thing, we give a certain stimulus and all kinds of things can come. So the principle is yangyam smarang bhavam, whatever you remember, whatever you're thinking of, absorbed in, the most prominent thought of that time, when you're leaving your body, forced to leave your body. Chajat jante kalevanam, giving up at the end time of the body. Tum tum, yum tum tum. In other words, that will determine. Evatikondeya sadat bhavata, certainly tad bhava bhavita, your destiny, what body you're going to inhabit in the next life. So that's what it's all about. You were in school until recently, and and all of us went through school, and there's a final exam. They call it a final exam at each level, maybe a mid-year, maybe an exam. And where I grew up, they had these things called the regents, which were put out by the state exam. And that was a standard exam. They could know who should go to school and so forth. So this is our final exam on this body, is, what are we going to be thinking of? And knowing that that final end could come at any time, we should be very desperate to fix our mind on Krishna. Now, this is, Prabhupada explained how the Hare Krishna mantra is a prayer. We should be thinking of prayer. Hare Krishna, oh Krishna, oh Radharani, please engage me in your service. So that's the central prayer. And there's so many prayers throughout our literature that we can adopt. Kunti's prayers, Bhishma's prayers, Prahlad Maharaj's prayers, Dhruva Maharaj's prayers are there right in the Bhagavatam. And each one of them is so rich. Gajendra's prayers. There's one prayer, I always forget it. I forget how it starts, but he's praying that he's saying that, oh, my dear Lord, someone who is actually free of material desires, akinchana, nishkinchanasa. And then they sing your glories, they chant your glories, then they dive into an ocean of nectar. It's just like Prahlad Maharaj says, how is there any problem if at any time you can experience the highest pleasure, and just by chanting the glories of your dear Lord? Nishkinchanatsa bhagavatam padam param jigamaso bhavasagarasya sandarshayam vishayanamata yoshidan ha handa vishabhakshanito visa. No, that one is that's an important prayer statement. That one says that anyone who is aspiring to be free of all attachments, and cross over the ocean of birth and death and worship the Lord, then for such a person to see a woman sensually involved with enjoying spirit is like drinking poison. That's important. It's one of the many nice brahmachari verses. But anyway, the idea is that we have a great wealth. We've been given such a golden opportunity by the efforts of Srila Prabhupada and those sincere followers of his who have helped us. And so we should take that opportunity and feel the urgency. This whole allegory is giving us a very graphic example of what not to do. This is the as I mentioned many times, Puranjan means the occupier of the city of the body. Well, that's everybody, and it's, of course, this human being we're talking about here. But he, the whole scene, how he gets attracted to the lady. He thinks, he thinks he's attracting her, but she's actually seducing him, and. The whole it's unusual in the Bhagavatam that goes on, and it's describing a material life. But of course, Prabhupada's purports and the explanation now will give the whole thing, brings it all back home. In other words, don't be like Puranjan. Don't simply get absorbed. And notice that I think I looked ahead, and he said, all these animals that he sacrificed are now ready to take their revenge. They're just waiting there, and he describes like his body's being cut up into little pieces by swords, But he's got a subtle body, but still you can feel pain. This is described the fifth canto. I remember my involvement with that the 17 books in 2-month marathon book production. Those was one of the chapters that I was editing. And it was all, time was of the essence. We're running out of time. I mean, 2 months is nothing. 17 books. So, of course, it was late night. I'm sitting there in my room. It's dark. Everyone's sleeping. And actually, someone had, some of the paintings never got printed in the books. I mean, and this was one of a hellish situation. And they put it in my room. And I'm looking at that. I mean, do I really need to look at the picture while I'm working on these horrific things? Middle of the night. But it's what's going on there is they give specific sins, heavy-duty sins. Oh God, those who boil animals alive. I immediately thought, I grew up in New York, So there you go. I never was attracted. I never thought of having a lobster. It's said to be a very great delicacy and everything. They had the windows in the windows they have the poor lobster is swimming there in his tank. You know, and it's full well known. Oh, I'll take that one. They go grab the lobster and they put him into the pot, and you're going to pay for it and eat it. So they gave him to hell for that. You get boiled, the same thing happens to you, but you don't die. It goes on and on and on repeatedly. I forget what the sin is where they throw you off the cliff, and your body is smashed. It's all rocks and everything. And then it's just your soul body. Okay, let's go back to the top again. Boom, and boom, boom. Illicit sex. So this one, everyone remembers this one. There's a painting of this. You have to embrace the molten form of the opposite sex. And it's not. There's one of the men who's molting too for the women, but because you're thinking on and on, And so now there's a lot of lessons here. Of course, the whole main thing. Well, I don't want that to happen. Where do I go to sign up? How do I avoid that? Okay, well that's in the next chapter. That's just at the very end of the 5th canto. Then you have Pritchett listening to all this, and first thing he says, well, how can they avoid it? What kind of prayaschitta, which is atonement, can people perform that they don't have to suffer these horrific hellish punishments? He asked Shukadev. So Shukadev described a process of material atonement, of undergoing austerities and brahmacharya and things like that. And that helps, to mitigate the sins. You can get rid of some seriousness of the sin by that way. But what's the difficulty? Damala, you know the answer? What's the problem with the prayaschitta? In other words, we're talking about not Krishna consciousness. This is material atonement. Mukunda? The point is, it doesn't uproot the desire for the sin, and that was Prickett's answer. He said it's just like you have a weed and you cut the weed, but you don't uproot it so it grows again. Yeah, and he gave this famous example of the elephant, the bathing elephant. The elephant takes a bath, He's all dusty and dirty, from a day in the forest, and so he goes into the tank or lake, and he gets all cleaned off. He's got a shower, built-in shower head, and cool. When he comes out and he wants to dry off, how's he going to do it? So he rolls around in the dust and dirty again. So Prabhupada would often tie this in with this the practice of many Christians of going to church once in a week and begging forgiveness, for confessing. Right, that's a big deal. Confessing to the priest. Okay, so many Hail Marys and okay, thank you, Father. Thank you so much. But there's no. You're not really being. Your heart isn't being purified of the tendency to sin. And so you fall back again. Maybe you get to the point of you're not even. You're going to throw in the towel. You're going to throw in the towel, and that's Prabhupada's point. But even if you don't, you're not really getting the higher taste, and therefore you can't say. What's the verse? 2nd chapter that talks about this. Vishaya. Nivardate. Thank you. So Vishaya, that's the object of the senses. Vinivartante nirahara siddhinak. So a living entity who by force stops consuming. Nirahara, ahara means to eat. So each sense has its object of eating, so called. So you by force of will you can stop consuming. You can give up drugs. Give up alcohol. But every alcoholic knows if you try to do it on your own, you're going to fail, right? Because the sense object is taken over your senses, your mind, your intelligence. You're addicted to it, But it's killing you, so therefore you give it up. Vishayabhanivata nidahara siddhinak rasavarjam, but the taste remains. Rasabhyasya, but the taste can also be expunged by padam drishra nivartate. By directly experiencing. Drishra is seeing, but it stands in for all the senses. Krishna, the transcendence, that can purify you even of the desire, and therefore you're secure in your sinlessness. That can really save you from the hellish punishment. So that process is the process of Krishna consciousness, of purification. And, where does it lead you? Right here. Even if you're in the mode of goodness, you don't perform so many, horrible sins, but still you're attached. Naturally, you're attached to your family and so forth. Then you come back, you still suffer birth and death. And who knows what happened in your next life? You can get into bad association and really become an out-and-out demon and go through a hellish punishment. So that's the reality of what's going on. And people are absorbed with the movie, the Matrix, the outside phantasmagoria, as Prabhupada puts it, of the material energy, Maya. She's the greatest con artist, She's convincing you 100% that you're this body, that your pleasure lies in the sense gratification. And not only grosses, but also the subtle mind can enjoy without the senses. You're looking at something and hearing something, but you're experiencing a whole array of sense gratification. So without good association, you're helpless. We're bound hand and foot, You may be in this mode of goodness, or tinged with a little passion, or you're in the mode of ignorance, doesn't matter. You're within the bounds of the material energy. And so the only hope for us and for anyone else is this knowledge which can change your activities, as Maharaj was explaining. By getting the right exposure to the books of Srila Prabhupada and to devotees, it can change your whole perspective on what's important, what's possible, what you should strive for. And so the intelligence gets purified and leads to the proper action. Again, that verse, kama dinam katina katita palita dunideshas, that the lust and its accomplices, anger, greed, illusion, have been my masters for life after life, for countless lives. Kama dinam katina katita palita dunideshas, bad commands, telling you to go here, do this, fight this person, kill this person, so many things. And I've been following those commands very humbly, but they never get satisfied. And they show me no mercy. But now my intelligence has been purified. How? By hearing. Chiefly by hearing the Shastra. And by hearing the holy name. And by the process of devotional service. So now my intelligence is strong, but that's not enough. So it's inspired me to run to you. Tvamayatakshadanamayam. Fearless shelter. Oh Lord, now please engage me in your service. In other words, I have to serve. I'm either going to be serving Maya, my senses, the demands of the kama and krodha, lust, anger, and greed, or I'm going to be serving Krishna. And what's the difference? Krishna is loving. He's merciful. He's on our side. Where these other elements are our enemies. They're even personified in the Bhagavatam. Here, everything is personified. You have the lust and his brother, who's anger, and fear is there. In the third canto, it's describing when Brahma is creating the universe. All of these forces have to be created in order to keep everyone bound up and going through their conditioned life. So Prabhupada is describing here the scene when the death finally takes place, and then you don't know where. You see so many people, the so-called leaders, whether it's corporate leaders or political leaders or Hollywood, and people are so arrogant and proud because they've got a little fame, they've got a little money, and they're not like all those other people who are unsuccessful. This is the demonic mentality. You read the 16th chapter. So much wealth do I have today? I'm going to get more, And yeah, it's a little illegal, but we have good lawyers, And on they go like that. And then, but everyone meets this point. Doesn't matter. Rockefeller, of course, the Rockefeller family is so famous. They were one of the pioneers in oil back in the early 19th century. And so there's a whole dynasty of Rockefellers. One of them became governor of New York. But one of the oldest ones who was involved in politics, I forget what his name was, but he just died a couple of years ago. He was over 100 years old,
And you can imagine, with all that money, you can buy the best, heart transplants, everything, But eventually, and all the evil he did, in exploiting people and funding the military, all kinds of stuff. And so you can imagine what he faced when that finally you had to be dragged out of that Rockefeller body, And now all those things you did, all those people you hurt, all that so-called domination, you have to pay for it, And we don't take pleasure in other people suffering, but that's actually the situation that's going on. And there, but for the grace of Srila Prabhupada and our forebears, go we. So we've been given this this treasure, the knowledge, the practice, the association, the deities, the prasadam, the holy name. There's a whole list of invaluable gifts that we've been given. And we should be appreciative and take it, just like someone gives you some Mahaprasad, you should honor it. This is a great gift. It's not just food, it's connection to Krishna, it's intimate association with Krishna, purifying in all kinds of ways. So similarly, the greatest prasad is this knowledge and is the process of devotional service. So let's take advantage of it. And what is that phrase? Learn it, live it, give it. That's my little T-shirt. Learn it, live it, give it. Any questions? Any comments? Any arguments? Okay, I'll leave you with a nice little poem. Actually, before I share with the poem, this verse, if anyone's interested in this verse, a few years ago we got the Bhanaswami's translation of the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. And many of the verses that we were just familiar with, Srila Prabhupada's translation is summary study, Nectar of Devotion. They appeared in Sanskrit, So this is one that I was very much attracted to, and of course it was most appropriate during Damodar month, but it's always more appropriate. And it's a meditation on little Krishna, and I think in India there's probably 100 million or more wives, who have got this little altar with this image of Krishna with one hand. He's carrying something, which is a butterball, and he's practically naked, and he's crawling, and he's looking at you, a little baby. That's that's from Bhagavatam. So this is a verse describing that. Kronata kanaka kinkani kalapam smitamukamudjana nasika gramuktam kadadata navanita pindamangre tanayamavekshanananda patni. Now let's figure out that last word. We all have some Sanskrit skills. Nanda Patni. You know who Nanda Patni is? Yes, Yashoda, so that's the name. And the word Nananda, you may not recognize, it's not a common word. But we know the word Nandana, as in Nanda Nandana or Yashoda Nandana, means, yeah. In other words, for parents, the children are the source of the greatest pleasure. So when you say Nanda Nandana, it means, that child of Nanda, Krishna, who's giving bliss to him, and of course everyone else. So Nandana, Nananda means to give pleasure. You see, the most delightful pleasure, Vatsalya Ras. So Nananda Nanda Patni means, Nananda Nanda Patni, is giving great bliss to the Yashoda, the wife. So what's he doing? Kwanita Kanaka Kinkani Kalapam. Kwanita is a word that means tinkling very softly. And Kanaka is gold. Kinkani is waist bells. So his golden waist bells are tinkling very softly and attractively as he crawls toward his mother. Kwanita Kanaka Kalapam simply means a series, Kwanita Kanaka Kinkani Kalapam, Smita Mukham. Who can guess what that means? You know what Mukha means? And Smitam? Yeah, smiling very softly, with that, Smita Mukham. Ujjvala, brilliant. Nasikagra. Nasa is the nose, and agra is the tip. So on the tip of his nose, Ujjala Nasikagram Muktam. Now this is a word that Banaswami actually didn't translate properly. This is why I remember this verse, because I wrote to him, and this is fixed. Muktam actually means a pearl. He's a little pearl is affixed to his nose. This is all he's got. He's wearing the kinkini, he's got the waist bells, and the pearl. That's all the clothes he has. So, Smita Mukam Ujjala Nasikagram Kada Dutta Navanitam. So, there's this word Navanita Taskara. Does anyone know what that means? Name for Krishna? Yeah, he's a Taskara, is a thief of Navanita, fresh butter. You see? So Kada Drita means in his hand he's holding Kada Drita Navanitam Nita Pindam. A pindam is a ball. He's holding a ball of fresh butter in his hand as he's crawling toward his mother. So that's, Navanita Smita Muktam Kada Drita Navanita Pindam Agre, in front of her, Agre Navanita Pindam Taniyam Aveksha. She sees her son. Taniyam is the son. Aveksha Nandananda Patni. So the whole thing, let's see, can you think of the meaning. Kvanata Kanaka Kinkani Kalapam Smita Mukam Ujjala Nasikagram Kadadata Navanita Pindamangre Tanayam Aveksha Nandananda Patni. Wonderful way of thinking of Krishna. So that's our verse of the day. What did we have? Nothing? Okay. All right, thank you for your attention. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Hari Hari Bo. Boy, we're spending months on this Paranjan.